Ford's all-new F-150 Lightning is not the first or even the second electric pickup truck on sale in the US, but this is by far the most important because Ford is going to be building affordable models under $40,000 starting. At the very beginning, it's also going to have the federal tax credit. Ford is also going to be building a truck based on a regular truck, and that is very unlike the other two EV trucks that are currently on sale. For me at least, the most interesting thing about the F-150 Lightning is that this is and isn't a dedicated EV platform. This is really a hybrid of the two worlds. Versus a regular F-150, the sheet metal up front is a little bit different. It's very, very similar, however. The cab is exactly the same as the regular F-150, and then the bed on the outside is a little bit different, but the bed on the inside is exactly the same. The frame is unique to the F-150 Lightning and likely other upcoming Ford battery electric SUVs, but the frame mounting points for certain accessories like these running boards are common with the regular F-150. So even though these are more aerodynamic than the ones on the regular gasoline model, if you preferred the look of the other ones or other aftermarket ones, you can just bolt them right on. The result of this hybrid approach is a true no-compromises electric pickup truck. If you're not a fan of a truck without a frame, this is your only option at the moment. There isn't a frame in the Rivian, and there isn't a frame in the Hummer or the Silverado EV. And if you're looking for high towing or high payload figures, we also find that in here. Double the payload capacity that we find in the Hummer, over 2,000 pounds when properly equipped, and towing up to 10,000 pounds when properly equipped, and that's the model that I'm driving right now. Up front, it is instantly recognizable as an F-150, but also instantly recognizable as the electric F-150. Most models are going to have this very distinctive LED strip that runs from one side to the other. You aren't going to find that, however, in the $40,000 model. We do have a different grille, obviously no grille right here. The only cooling is going on right down there at the bottom of the front end. And that's because a lot less cooling is required for an EV truck. And that's part of why, if I click the little button that's right here under the Ford logo, we have an absolutely enormous front trunk, and it is fully powered. This cargo capacity is over 14 cubic feet, and Ford says you can put 400 pounds of payload inside the front trunk. So unlike some pickup trucks where you have lockable storage, something like a Honda Ridgeline that's in the back, you can't access that lockable storage area while there's cargo in the back, but in here you can right under the front. Thanks to a generously sized front trunk, this scores 8 out of 10 points in my new exclusive front trunk comfort index. I really appreciate the fact that you can open and close the front trunk from the remote control. A lot of truck shoppers will be happy to know we still have metal bumpers up front, and tow hooks are standard in every trim. Inside the front trunk, there's a little bit of additional storage space right there under the floor. That's where you can store the EVSE that comes with the vehicle. The 12-volt battery is right back there behind that little door, and then over here on this side, we find ports for the onboard 2.4 kilowatt AC inverter. A cool touch for campers in the crowd, these ports will operate while the vehicle is running, so you could put something like a cooler that's electric in here and keep that cool as you're driving down the road. If you want to take an even deeper dive into the F-150 Lightning, you'll find a different video on the EV Buyer's Guide channel where I dive into all the minutiae that you might be interested in. At 232.7 inches long, the F-150 Lightning is about the same length as the average truck in America, because the average truck in America is sold right like you see it here, with the big cab option and the 5.5-foot bed behind. Because Ford wanted to keep a lot of components common with the regular F-150 under the skin, the front end is basically the same length as the regular F-150. If you're the kind of person that says, I would really love an EV truck with an 8-foot bed and a 2-door cab, Ford has not said that that's in the cards, but it is much more likely with the F-150 platform. And that's simply because Ford already has a regular cab and a regular 8-foot bed that would mount on any of their pickup truck frames. So most likely it would not be a significant investment to actually do that in the F-150 Lightning if there was enough customer demand. So be sure and reach out to Ford and beg for one, because it is much more likely with this than a unibody truck like the Chevy Silverado EV, which would require very significant engineering changes. Moving around to the rear, you'll start to notice some of the subtle changes versus the regular F-150. These taillamp modules still stick out from the body a bit, but they're definitely much more aerodynamic than in the regular model. The tailgate is subtly different from the regular F-150. It has an LED light pipe to help it match what's going on up front, and then the reverse lights move to the middle of the tailgate unit. That means that if I lower this power tailgate, it will power open and power close. We find backup light repeaters on the inside. When the tailgate's closed, you notice it has a slight curve, and that hides that secondary backup light module inside. I think that's really elegantly done. We find the same integrated step right there in the middle of the tailgate that we find in the regular model. And the same slots where you can use C-clamps, the work surface that we've seen in other F-150 models with sort of a cup holder there, pencil holder, and then rulers integrated right there into the tailgate. Although the sheet metal on the outside of the bed is unique, the sheet metal on the inside of the bed is exactly the same. And that means that bed liners and other accessories that you might want to bolt right into the bed of your F-150 are going to fit in here just like they do in a gasoline model. On this side, we find the same sort of inverter ports that we find in the F-150 hybrid. At least for the moment, all F-150 Lightnings will have dual identical motors, and it appears that the base model and the upper end trims are actually using the exact same electric motors, but different battery packs, and that's why we end up at different horsepower totals. The base model gives you 452 horsepower total, 775 pound-feet of torque, and the extended range battery pack, which is what I'm driving right now, bumps that up to 580 horsepower and 775 pound-feet of torque. The base battery pack is approximately 98 kilowatt hours in capacity. The optional battery pack is a 131 kilowatt hour unit, and again, that's the one that I'm driving right here. That bigger battery pack will give you 320 miles of range in this trim if you opt for the top-end Platinum trim that drops down to 300 miles. The standard range battery pack is going to be on sale for everybody. That will give you 230 miles of range. One weird twist, however, you cannot get the base model with the extended range battery pack unless you're a fleet customer. As usual, payload and towing will vary based on the trim level and the options that you select. The base battery will tow up to 7,700 pounds when properly equipped, and it's going to give you the highest payload ability because it's going to be the lightest model, up to 2,235 pounds of payload. If you get the extended range battery pack and the max tow package, you'll be able to tow up to 10,000 pounds. In the Platinum trim, up to 8,400 pounds because of its added curb weight. And payload will range nominally between around 2,000 pounds and 1,600 pounds, depending on the trim level. But additional options that you may add will obviously lower your payload. So this particular Lariat trim theoretically started around 1,800 pounds, but as equipped here is 1,697 pounds of payload. Any way you slice it, that is significantly higher than the payload that we find in the GMC Hummer. It's worth noting that if you add the optional spare tire in your Hummer, you're going to end up well below 1,000 pounds of payload. In case you're wondering, the spare tire is in the same location as the regular F-150's spare tire. It does not have a matching rim and is technically not a full-size spare, although at 205 width, it is actually pretty similar to the standard tire size that we find on this model, and likely a full-size spare would fit under there. Speaking of tires, I think the General Grabber tire is kind of an unusual choice here. These are 275/60 R20s, and obviously you could easily swap these out for whatever you wanted aftermarket, whether you're interested in something a bit more economical or a bit grippier. On the passenger side, we find what appears to be a second charge door, but this is just a trim panel. All the charging happens over there on the driver's side. There are two different onboard chargers depending on which battery you get. The base battery gets an 11.5 kW onboard charger. The bigger battery pack gets a 19.2. If you have access to an EVSE that will charge at that maximum rate, the standard range pack can gain 19 miles of range per hour, the extended range 30 miles per hour. As you'd expect, the front seats are the same as the ones in the regular F-150, so we find a two-way adjustable lumbar support in this model, powered multi-way driver's seat, power memory-linked tilt telescopic steering column with a 3-position memory over there on the driver's door, and electric adjustable pedals as well. If you get the Platinum trim, then you get massaging front seats and a bit more adjustability. But thankfully, even in this trim, the front passenger seat has the exact same range of motion as the driver's seat. As with the front passenger compartment, we find basically the same kind of room back here that we find in the regular F-150. If you get this optional large panoramic moonroof, it is going to cut down headroom a bit, so keep that in mind. I have about 1 inch of headroom left, and you will get more if you skip that option. This is definitely a wide cabin, so fitting 3 adults across the rear, absolutely no problem. Moving all the way over to the right side, this front seat's all the way back in its tracks. I still have about 4 or 5 inches of room left. Under the seats, we find the same collapsible storage area that we find in the regular F-150. We then have some additional storage space right there in that area. And from here, you can see the very slight bump in the floor that we get between those two outboard seating positions. I am surprised that Ford doesn't give us one floor mat right there across the back. As we take a look around, keep in mind this is a Lariat trim, and this particular model MSRP is for just over $81,000. We have that large panoramic moonroof. It extends to just over the rear passenger's laps. Obviously, the upholstery and the color palette is going to change based on the option and the trim that you select. This particular model has a two-tone gray-on-gray interior with brown stitching. In this trim, the door panels use a variety of different materials. This upper section here kind of reminds me of a denim texture. We then have brown stitching to match the seats. There's lots of storage going on in the front doors, a mid pocket and then a lower pocket that's divided into a bottle holder and then a larger general storage area. Ford likely calls the color of this stitching copper because we do have some imitation copper accents in the cabin, like above the upper glove box. We open that with this button here, and as you can see, there's definitely enough room in there for some larger smartphones. The upper section of the dash is made from hard touch materials. The midsection is stitched as we find on the doors, as is the lower section just below that upper glove box. We then find a pretty standard sized bin-style compartment there. I could not fit a larger tablet computer inside. To the left of that, we find a 12-volt power port and another 20-amp 120-volt outlet. Depending on the version of the Lightning you get, it will have one of two different infotainment systems, although the software is fairly common between the two. This is the larger 15-inch portrait-style screen, basically borrowed out of the Ford Mustang Mach-E. We also have the same sort of volume knob that we find in that Mustang. I know a lot of folks aren't the biggest fan of this particular design, but I have to say I kind of like it. I love the fact that we get Big Apple CarPlay in portrait orientation mode there. That's definitely going to be handy when we start taking a look at mapping in this interface. And there's still plenty of room at the bottom of the screen for reserved system functions like the climate control functionality down there. You can get your turn-by-turn navigation directions over here, even when you're seeing something else in CarPlay up there. Vehicle settings are right over here with that little Ford truck icon. If you want to know more about this entire interface, there's going to be a separate video on the EV Buyer's Guide channel just on the software. On either side of the large LCD, we have more copper accents, and then the camera is seeing this little blinking light that is not visible to the naked eye. That's part of the driver monitoring system for the Ford Blue Cruise setup. This is Ford's semi-autonomous driving system. There is another sensor over there on the driver's door. We find the same sensors basically in the regular versions of the F-150. Below that section, we find the Pro Trailer Assist dial that allows you to help back up a trailer there. Start, stop button over there, integrated trailer brake controller, nice touch. Some physical buttons down there at the bottom for the defroster, hazard lights, autonomous parking system, and stability control. Below that, there is a storage compartment where we find a Qi wireless charging mat, 2 USB inputs, lots of additional storage. Same sort of center console we find in the regular F-150. So this handle will descend right there into that cubby if you want to use the most of this area. We fold that down, and then we have a flat work surface right across the top. That's a pretty handy touch, especially for DC fast charging, I have to say. There's a slot here where you can keep things like your wirelessly connected smartphone, 2 big cup holders, and then a very big storage area right there under that armrest. Lots of storage room in there and a little bit of a divider. On the driver's side, we find a standard full LCD instrument cluster. The theme of this display doesn't really change too much. That's what sport mode looks like. Changes a little bit for off-road mode. It's basically just the colors there, and that's what tow haul mode looks like. The steering wheel is a round 4-spoke design. You'll find the controls for the adaptive cruise control over here on the left side, also volume up, down. On the right side, we find track forward, backward, and the controls for that multifunction LCD cluster. Clearly, the first thing you're going to notice about the Lightning out on the road is the insane amount of power. Even if I'm going just, say, 30 miles an hour and I stomp on the throttle, I get wheel slip in the back and just a tiny bit in the front as well, because there is just so much power coming from these electric motors. Now, 0 to 60 time in my preliminary testing out here in San Antonio came in at 4.2 seconds, 0 to 60. So this actually beats Ford's estimate. Ford was saying mid 4-second range, but then they came out and said, well, the electric motors are actually going to give us a bit more power than they initially thought, and I suspect they just haven't revised the 0 to 60 estimate for it yet. More impressive than that, a number of us were able to do repeated 0 to 60 runs out here in San Antonio, and very repeatedly, this was running the exact same 0 to 60 time. That likely makes this the fastest Ford production truck. Without a doubt, that is significantly faster than the last F-150 to wear the Lightning name. Also impressive is the 60 to 0 stopping distance. For an electrified vehicle, keep in mind this is lighter than the Hummer, and I suspect also going to be lighter than the Silverado. It took just 126 feet for this to stop from 60 back to 0. That is right in line with gasoline trucks that are certainly going to be lighter than this. That said, of course, the interesting thing about the Lightning is that curb weight in this is substantially more similar to an average truck like that GMC Sierra right there than, for instance, the new GMC Hummer. You'll certainly notice the difference in the way that this handles. Common wisdom also tells us that a unibody vehicle should handle better than a body-on-frame vehicle, but actually the Lightning feels considerably better out on regular road surfaces than the new Hummer does. And that's thanks to the lightweight and just the design of this vehicle. I also think this rides better than really any F-150 because of that independent rear suspension and the added weight of the battery pack likely as well. You'll certainly notice that out on rougher road surfaces, this soaks up small imperfections and large imperfections a little bit better. And the ride quality, if you want to do some mild off-roading in your pickup truck, that's also going to be a little bit more comfortable in here than the average F-150 as well. Now, because of the way they've positioned the motors and the battery packs in this vehicle, it still does have a little bit more weight up front than in the rear. So you will notice that out on the road that the rear end can feel a little bit light, but thanks to the battery packs and the added weight, not as light as a regular F-150. In case you're wondering, you can do donuts with your F-150 Lightning, although even when the traction control says it's disabled, it's still engaged to some extent. It's a little bit difficult to talk about cabin noise since I haven't been testing this at home, but it does appear to be quieter than average. Of course, trucks are generally fairly quiet because they're body-on-frame vehicles and there's some isolation between those two components, but this also has that big battery pack which definitely helps absorb sound. Fuel economy and range, those are difficult things to talk about for sure. So far today, I've been averaging about 2 miles per kilowatt hour. That theoretically should put this particular vehicle in real-world driving at around 260 miles of range. It is EPA rated for 320. But it's really going to depend on exactly how you're driving your truck. I have been out here in Texas, and the speed limits are higher than in most states. If you're in an area where you're doing a lot more country driving or city driving and you're never really going over about 65 miles an hour, you will likely get notably better range and probably closer to that EPA score. Exactly how close, we'll have to wait until I can get this at home and run it through my real-world range test. The important thing to remember about range calculations is that the EPA range score is based on 55% city driving, 45% highway driving, and when a lot of people think about range and how far a vehicle will go, they're really thinking about highway driving. Now, if you want to go on the EPA website, you can adjust the city highway percentage on vehicles, and that will give you a bit closer to real-world range. Bottom line out on the road, Ford has done more than just make an electrified F-150. They've managed to make, I think, the best F-150 that they've made so far. From the ride quality to the handling ability relative to the other specifications in the vehicle, this is absolutely excellent. It's not the best handling F-150, but it is excellent for the payload, the performance, and everything else that we get in here. By far the most common question I get about the Lightning or any EV truck is, what kind of effect does towing have on range? There's an easy answer and then there's a real answer. The easy answer, you should bet on a reduction of about 50% of your range when towing the average trailer. The real answer, of course, is that there is no average trailer, and I can't really give you an answer because you could have a 5,000-pound trailer on this vehicle that would reduce its range by 30%, or you could have a 5,000-pound trailer that could reduce its range by 80%, depending on the kind of trailer you have. Is it a flatbed trailer? Is it a box trailer? Is it a horse trailer? Is it a teardrop camping trailer? How many axles does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4? What are the tire sizes on the trailer, etc.? All of that is going to factor into the kind of range reduction you could expect in anything. Now, if you already are towing with the gasoline pickup truck, then answering this question for yourself should be somewhat easy. If you have an F-150 right now and towing whatever trailer you tow, you see a reduction in fuel economy of about 50%, then you should expect approximately a 50% reduction in fuel economy in the F-150 Lightning. Because there's so many variables involved, Ford has a software solution. On the infotainment system, you enter some basic trailer details, and then when you connect the trailer, you tell the vehicle that it has that particular trailer connected. The car is then going to keep a log, basically, of your consumption, and then it's going to calculate a more real-world range figure on the instrument cluster. And it's going to know when you've traded out trailer for trailer as long as you've told it the right trailer. Over time, that estimate should get more and more accurate as long as the profile of the trailer has not changed. So again, the flatbed setup, where you have a very different load on the back, that is going to be a lot more unpredictable than, say, towing your same camping trailer time over time or towing your boat to the marina. That's going to be far more consistent, and in those situations, the vehicle should give you a very real-world estimate. Now it's time for some bad news. If you don't already have a reservation on an F-150 Lightning, you're probably not going to get one for at least 12 months. There's a possibility that a few dealers out there might have some orders that customers have rejected, they decided they didn't want, so you might be able to get on a list for one, but otherwise, the entire production for 2022 is sold out, and in 2023 calendar year, they're probably going to have a new allotment that will open up, so you should act fast when the order books reopen. The Pro model is going to start at $39,974, and it's going to be available right away, again, if you already have a pre-order on one. Production for that Pro model was only delayed about a few weeks versus the top-end trims, so that's very different than what we see in the GM pickup truck lineup, or, of course, with the Rivians, where they're only building the upper-end trims and the most expensive models first. Theoretically, there will be a Silverado EV with a low price point similar to this at some point in time, but it's not expected until calendar year 2024, so about 2 years after the Lightning goes on sale. That base model is going to give you 452 horsepower, the dual motor setup standard, rear locker standard, vinyl seats on the inside, and a smaller infotainment screen. If you want more creature comforts, like I expect most shoppers probably do, you're going to want to step up into the XLT trim. That starts at $52,974, so a really significant bump over that Pro model. On the outside, you're not going to notice too much difference. We have the LED accent strip running right there across the front. The grille sort of a insert here, not really a grill, I guess. That does change a little bit from Pro to XLT, but we still get the tow hooks up front. Now, the XLT trim is the first one that you and I will be able to get with the bigger battery pack. And that extended range model, well, it's significantly more expensive than the base version of the Lightning, starting at $72,474. That's going to give you 320 miles of range and bump power up to 580 horsepower. As you'd logically expect, if you want max payload in your Lightning, you're going to want the small battery. If you want the max power and max towing, you're going to want the big battery, but you are going to have to give up a little bit of payload. But honestly, as we see in the rest of the F-150 lineup, payload is pretty healthy throughout the lineup. There are regular gasoline trucks out there, notably from Chevy and from Ram, that have payload ratings under 1,000 pounds in their gasoline format, and Ford generally has pretty high payload ratings. Now, moving on up the ladder, the Lariat trim is going to start at $67,474. A Lariat with the big battery, which is where this started, $77,474. If you add the max tow package, a bunch of other stuff on it, you'll end up at around $81,000, which is where this model sits. The Platinum trim, that's going to have everything on it, basically $90,874. There are a few options still available on the Platinum, but it does come very well equipped. If I were going to buy a Lightning, I would get the Lariat with the bigger battery pack. And that's really obvious because that's exactly what I ordered. I do have a Lightning on order right now. It's scheduled to be produced May 9th, and I will update you all when I actually get my hands on one. As I've done with other EVs here at Alex Nautos and our partner channel, EV Buyer's Guide, we're going to have the Lightning for at least 9 months. And exactly how long we end up keeping it will kind of depend on exactly how much I like it. It is possible that the Lightning could end up replacing our Hyundai Nexo in the lineup, which we had for 3 years. So somewhere between 9 months and 3 years, depending on exactly how good it turns out to be. First with the Mach-E and now with the Lightning, Ford has set the bar very high for themselves, and I think it really shows in the sales. The Mach-E is now the third best-selling EV in America, and I suspect if Ford could actually meet their production goals in the future of 250,000 units a year, that it could be number 2 in America, and the F-150 might even be third. But more than that, Ford has created what America has been asking for a while, a no-compromises electric pickup truck. In fact, actually there are areas where this really exceeds the practicality that we find in a gasoline F-150. We have very similar towing and payload figures. Remember that in a lot of states in the US, you cannot tow more than 10,000 pounds conventional without a Class A license. So this is right up there at that limit where most shoppers are going to be. Plus, we have a cargo area up front larger than the average mid-size sedan that can handle a payload of 400 pounds. So if for some reason you wanted to lock your concrete bags away, you could do that in the front trunk. We have a cab that is exactly the same size as a regular F-150 because it is a regular F-150's cab, and then a perfectly practical 5.5-foot bed in the back with over 2,000 pounds of payload availability. And even this model, which is chock full of features like the leather upholstery on the inside, the bigger touchscreen, softer padding, more sound deadening, etc., this one still has a payload rating above the last Chevy and Ram pickup trucks that I had in, and those had gasoline engines. So the added weight of the battery pack clearly has not impacted the capability of the F-150 too much, and versus the other electric truck that is in the same size category currently, again, that is only the Hummer EV, it has a very different mission than this. It's much more of an off-road focused vehicle. It's more of a premium vehicle. It has, crazy airlift suspension, lots of off-road ability, the tri-motor setup, etc. But it weighs about a Honda Civic more than this F-150 Lightning. And that really hampers its towing ability, which is significantly lower than this, its payload ability, which is significantly lower than this, and more importantly, its efficiency and its charging speed as well. When you connect this to the standard charging connector that you're going to have in your garage or you might find at the office, you're going to gain range significantly faster, about twice as fast as that Hummer EV. And that's the difference between having a long commute, plugging in at the office, and being fully charged for your return commute, or ending up back at home with even less charge than you left. While we wait for the hotly anticipated Silverado EV and any upcoming electrified Ram pickup truck, at the moment, for me, there is only one way to go, and that is F-150 Lightning. Now, to answer some of your questions, I do still have a Rivian on order. But honestly, I think I'm going to cancel it because I have no idea when it's actually going to arrive. It should have been here by now. Actually, it should have been here 2 years ago, to be perfectly honest. But Rivian continually delays and delays and delays. And honestly, at this point in time, the Lightning just seems to be a better truck. It is less expensive than the Rivian. It gets about the same kind of range as the Rivian while being a full-size truck with a bigger front trunk, a bigger cab, a bigger bed in the rear, more towing ability, more payload ability, all that kind of stuff, and hopefully the promise of lower maintenance costs thanks to it being a Ford and them having spent a little bit more time and having a bit more experience with electrification. It also is a bit more mechanically simple with the dual motor setup rather than a quad motor setup, all that kind of stuff. I think that I would just end up with the Lightning if my own money were on the line. For the exact answer though, wait till I actually get the Rivian if it ever comes. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button down there. Find me over at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those other social places, and I'll see everybody next week.